Good morning, guys. I wanted to make sure that you have the information and some reminders for what's coming. Our unit circle memory quiz is going to be Thursday of this week. And next week, I just wanted to let you know, so pull out your calendars and just write down that the test is going to move until Wednesday. So I'm going to push the test one day, and that way you guys have an extra day to study. All right, on to the lesson for today. So our lesson today is putting trig values in different quadrants. And so we're using some unit circle things, but we're going to move them off of the unit circle. So it's still going to be y over r and x over r and y over x, and those letters are going to be the same, but we're going to use bigger numbers than 1 and 1/2 and square root 3 over 2. We're going to use bigger numbers than that today. So you are going to want a calculator for this information today. So here I have some given information, and so my question for you is, where would you draw this triangle given this information, and where would you draw the triangle if you're given this information? And so I'm going to start with number 2 because that one's a little easier to have a final answer for. And so -5 and -12 are for sure going to put me into quadrant 3. So I can draw this into quadrant 3, and I know that this needs to be -5 and this needs to be -12, and there's a coordinate here because -5, -12 is in quadrant 3. But for sine, +3 could go in this quadrant, or it could go in this quadrant where this is 3 and this is 5 and this is 3 and this is 5. We don't know anything about x given this information. And so that's some of the things that we're going to think about today, that we need at least 2 pieces of information in order to figure it out if we're given the y value and the radius. But if we're given x and we're given y, then we know exactly where we're going to be. So sometimes the information is going to give us all the information that we need, and sometimes it isn't. So here, we're going to use the same information that we started with on the last slide, but it's going to be, I'm going to tell you that it's in quadrant 2. And so some of us on the last test struggled which quadrant was which. And so let's label these first to make sure that we know which quadrant is which. And so I'm going to draw my triangle in quadrant 2, and it is always going to sit on the x-axis. And so when I draw this, it's going to sit on the x-axis, just like we drew our triangles when we drew the unit circle several weeks ago. So sine of theta, here is our theta that's going to get us over here. So this is our theta, our angle measure. This is 3, and this is 5. And so if we're trying to solve for this last side, we can use Pythagorean theorem. And so remember that we have a squared plus b squared equals c squared. The c is always the hypotenuse, or always our radius. And so we have 3 squared plus b squared, or x, you could call this x, equals 5 squared. And so I have 9 plus b squared is equal to 25. 25 minus 9, when we move this over, is 16. And so b is going to equal 4. And so instead of b here, I'm going to call that 4. And so now that I have all 3 sides of my triangle, just like I did in the unit circle, like sometimes this was 1/2, sometimes this was square root 3 over 2, and this was 1, we could write all of our trig functions given our values. Well, now that these numbers are whole numbers, we can do the same thing. Let me mention one more thing. And so because this is in quadrant 2, this is actually a negative 4 instead of positive 4. So it's negative 4, positive 3, and positive 5. Your radius is always going to be positive. Your x value going to the left is always negative. Any y values that you have going down, those would also be negative. And so this is negative 4, positive 3, and 5. And so cosine is going to be negative 4 over 5. Sine is 3 over 5. Or my y over my r value. This is my x over my r value. Tangent is still y over x, so 3 over negative 4. Cosecant is r over y, reminding us of that, so 5 over 3, or the reciprocal of sine. So hopefully you see here that 3 over 5 changes to 5 over 3 when it's cosecant. Secant is r over x, or the reciprocal of cosine. So we can come from here as 5 over the x value, which is negative 4, or we can take the reciprocal of our cosine, and then tangent is going to be the reciprocal of cotangent, or x over y, and so this would be the negative 4 over 3. And so we can just see that all of these different fractions, or the trig values, we can write all of those as new fractions instead of all of our unit circle numbers. We can do the same thing with the points that we started with, negative 5 and negative 12, from the kind of warm-up question here. And so same thing. One thing that you do need to remember when you're using quadratic formula is that you have to put those negative numbers in parentheses. So when you square those, the negatives must be in parentheses. Otherwise, you're going to get weird answers. And so when you do this, you end up with 25 plus 144 equals c squared. 169 equals c squared. And the square root of that is a nice happy number, 13. And so, like I said before, your radius is always going to be a positive number. It's never going to be a negative number until later on. But for now, your radius is always positive. So same thing here, we're going to say y over r. So my y value, negative 12, over my r value is 13. Cosine is negative 5, or x, over 13, over the radius. Tangent is y over r, negative 12 over negative 5. And hey, we have two negatives, and so in this case, we can simplify this to a positive 12 over 5. Cosecant is r over y. Oh, I said this wrong. Sorry, guys. Y over x. R over y is going to be the reciprocal of sine, so 13 over negative 12. R over x for secant is 13 over negative 5. And cotangent is the reciprocal. They are both negative, and so this will be x over y, and negative 5 over negative 12, which will also simplify to a positive on this one. So we're just writing lots of fractions and using what we know about these fractions to create our right triangle and then all of our different trig fractions, our trig ratios. Last question of the day. So we have sine is equal to y over r, and tangent is equal to y over x. And so what I want you to think about is, how can we draw the triangle? We know that the radius has to be positive, and therefore the y value is the part that has to be negative. And so if y has to be negative, that means I have to be down here, which means that quadrant 1 and quadrant 2 are out and quadrant 3 and quadrant 4 are in. And so if we know that -8 has to be negative, but the whole thing for tangent has to be positive, we know that 15 also has to be negative, which puts us into quadrant 3, where y and x both have to be negative. And the nice thing about this is we don't have to do Pythagorean theorem because we already know all three values. We know -8 is our y, we know -15 is our x value, so everything lines up. Y is -8, -15 is x, and the positive radius is 17. And so on these questions, we're just going to draw the triangle and be done. And that is everything that we are covering today. Here's your reminders again. Make sure you put those in your notes, and until next time.